I've listened to a couple of stand-up comedians that have talked a lot about
this. Usually where I get my knowledge.
Talked about some, some of the major concerns and some of the sort of nuances of the issue. But like one thing that I keep on thinking about is that, so let's do a hypothetical here. You meet a girl, right? And after you meet her, you think, man, that girl was really, like pretty, really cool.
Sure.
And you think, what can I do to, to advance my status with this particular person? Is there anything that I could do for her? And then you think, I got it. Why don't I send her a picture of my dick?
yeah. I think
she might like that.
You know what I did once? I'm just gonna. So I had this girl. It was like I wanted to.
Hands are ringing with anticipation.
This girl who said I asked her to send a picture or something because I took a picture of something I thought was funny. It was just myself acting like a dumbass. But she said, if
you took a picture of something that
I thought was funny, it was my penis. Yeah. No. But so. Oddly enough, it was, but that's regardless. Anyway, she said, if you're about to send me a dick pic, then, you really need to consider your options because this is probably not the way you want to go with that.
Right.
And so I just wrote dick on a piece of paper and took a picture of that.
Yeah, never mind all the concerns about, efficacy, which I think are valid, but I think a lot of other people have that subject covered. I just want to know, and by the way, I'm all for, sexual liberation for both men and women, so, if everybody's cool with it, I'm fine. But maybe it's just me being old and, wondering how exactly we came to the point. It was something like if you do acid 6 times in your life, then you're legally insane.
Yes, I do remember that. I certainly remember that because I've done acid 6 times in my life, and I do feel a little insane, nice. but not probably true.
I should come clean and let you guys know that I am coming at this subject from a completely academic standpoint. I'm
the real world check on his theories.
I've never had any sort of experience with psychedelics, and that's not for lack of wanting to, but
hey, I got a guy who knows the thing.
I got a guy who knows what's up, or whatever. I don't know. That was dumb.
You don't know how drugs work, Kevin.
I don't know how drugs work, but I've read a lot about it.
That's like the same thing.
But
here,
how fucking I don't know. We didn't have the internet, I guess.
When that theory came out, the urban legend,
or with the urban legend, because I mean, it's fucking ridiculous.
It is.
And you remember, and this is also where I'm getting my information from. You remember the movie SLC Punk?
I do remember SLC Punk.
Salt Lake City.
Yeah, it wasn't that when he was running and
the sprinkler turned on and he had a bunch of
stuff.
Yeah. And then the next time Matthew Lillard saw him, he was all fucking thwacked out.
Yes, I do recall that. though, to be fair, that was a lot of acid. I imagine that would probably be a little bit disturbing, but transdermal contact is for sure. You can definitely get that.
Yeah, but absolutely. In fact, the origin story of LSD is pretty interesting and involves a little bit of both of those. So for those of you who are uninitiated in the information regarding the development of LSD, lysergic acid, there's a guy named Albert Hofmann back in the 1950s, I guess, who worked for a Swiss pharmaceutical company called Sandoz Laboratories. And so that's kind of where we have all the
Gotcha.
met a girl named Sandos or whatever.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, that was, I can't remember who originally did the song, but I do remember that the Smashing Pumpkins covered it, which I thought was really fun.
I figured you would know that.
That's my generational contribution to the pop culture of.
So knowing the thing, not
origin.
adding to the actual generational culture, but just knowing the thing about.
So, to jump off of your little point though about large quantities of LSD and everything like that. So Hoffman had developed LSD because he was trying to develop a drug that would alter like heart rate and respiration and things like that. And so he was like injecting these rats with LSD, and he noticed that other than the fact that they seemed to lose sort of like motor control or whatever,
just disregard that issue. Yeah.
Other than that,
sounds like a winner.
He wasn't getting the effects that he wanted.
Okay.
And then one day he is in the lab, and despite the fact that he's being, he's a professional and he's being very careful and everything, apparently he gets like a drop.
Fucking happens.
Of
yeah.
acid on his skin, and he gets really sick and starts like feeling really fucked up, and so he has.
I gotta imagine the first person who ever had that experience.
He thought he was being
terrified.
poisoned.
Yeah. It does. It really doesn't sound like that would be a fun thing to have. I think I've gotten maybe half didn't know about it one time, and that was a little terrifying until I knew. Started piecing the puzzles together in my mind.
So this little tiny dose that he got from contact with his skin was enough to like send him like flying or whatever. But apparently that was like. And then he started like experimenting with it on himself to try to figure out what the effects were exactly or whatever. So he started off with something like 1,000th of what he thought was going to be an effective dose, and then like injected that. I think it was intravenous, but anyway, and then he just like started tripping balls right away, and like had what he described, I guess, as like some of the most profound experiences of his life.
I'm glad that he erred on the side of caution.
Right, but so like that kind of plays in or talks about the relative like safety of LSD is because he was giving these rats like these fucking massive doses of LSD, and they were fine.
They were fine. They just hadn't. And
I think there have been quite a few individuals who have experimented with large quantities of LSD and have come out of it relatively like not neurologically unscathed or whatever. Of course. A repeating theme that's going to come up a lot of times today is that it changes a lot of people's lives. The experiences. So one of those people that has probably experimented with about as large a dose as you might imagine wanting to ever encounter is Timothy Leary. So we would be pretty remiss to not mention him.
What do you have the numbers on that?
I don't have the numbers. I don't know if he's ever really come clean about it. Maybe he has. I'll try to look for a book or something and do a little bit more further research.
That does seem a little suspicious if he's cool with saying he's taken the most large quantities, but he will not disclose the amount.
It's Timothy Leary is kind of an interesting character from what I've been finding out over this past week, and that for those of you who don't know, Timothy Leary was part of the Harvard Department of Psychopharmacology, and he was one of the first scientists to really study the psychological or the potential psychological benefits of hallucinogens.
Because it did have a very valid grounding when it first started out.
Right. It was developed as as potentially a psychomimetic, which means that it was thought that it would induce a psychotic state. So it was originally marketed to psychologists so that they could take it,
so they could experience the state of understand.
Yeah. We've learned since then, of course, that that the effects of hallucinogens don't closely mirror that of people with mental illness or schizophrenia.
That seems pretty valid, just from my experience with people who have had schizophrenia. The things that they describe, certainly you can imagine a little bit of crossover there, but especially the duration, I guess, would be whatever you're going into with the acid, you're coming out of it, generally speaking, and I'm imagining that has something to do with it. But it does seem like it's pretty wide spectrum of this. God damn it, I can't think of a word. You know what I'm saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I know what you're saying. I was going to let you finish your point, but and I'm going to start this off kind of going through a lot of facts, because one of the things I've been getting really paranoid with these episodes about is that I'm not covering everything that I had hoped to cover
with the updated pace.
Yeah, and especially since we're trying to move a little faster and get these episodes down to a more reasonable, more manageable size.
Yeah.
So one of the things about Timothy Leary, though, that I found really interesting is that when he was having a lot of success in his research, he started sort of becoming a part of the counterculture, I guess, and sort of advocating for like widespread non-clinical use of LSD, and so he sort of became a part of like the rising hippie movement.
Interesting. Gotcha.
And was a big advocate of just everybody having access to LSD and things like that.
I mean, it can certainly
shift
some perspectives.
Yeah, but like his enthusiasm in that respect, led in large part to the mainstream sort of rejection, I guess. Of,
you can't have a scientist be too happy about something.
Yeah, he kind of, in a way, sort of contributed to the stigmatization of hallucinogens in psychology. So,
when's the CIA get involved in this? That's what I want to know.
I didn't get into the CIA a whole lot. We do know that that the CIA did run programs to try to induce certain mental states and certain results from people by giving them large doses,
including the dispersal of it over I guess was it a city or a town of some sort? Mm-hmm. I'd really need to look it up. It's been a little while since
I don't know that was specifically. I know what you're talking about. It was Chicago, I think. Or it was Chicago or St. Louis or something like that, where they tested like dispersing an agent over a city population, and they were like, but they used. That's
not specifically the one I'm thinking of. I don't think. No. I'm thinking of one where they specifically gave LSD unknowingly to a small population of people and just sort of observed the effects.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That really, actually, I would really. Hear that. I know. I think I maybe need to look into that, because the thing is, like that is such
a Fringe or something.
Well, which funny that you mentioned that, because totally the Fringe dude who the doctor on Fringe has a TV show on the Science Channel about like weird scientific experiments. He totally did an episode on that. So the thing is, like, it's so like common perception that this happened that I'm actually a little curious whether it really did happen or not.
Whether it really did, yeah.
I fully know that they did do testing on unknowing people, I guess, but I don't know whether they actually did testing on a wide scale, just so blasé about it. But I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. I really think they did, though. I'm gonna have to look into that.
That's okay. We can get back to that. There's plenty of time. Oh gosh. I guess, and we can kind of segue from the whole Harvard studies on hallucinogens with sort of the newest group to work with Harvard. And it's called MAPS. This is where a lot of research into psychedelics and the resurgence into their potential psychological benefits.
I saw that name. I got it too.
Yes, MAPS. So MAPS stands for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And so they've been a really big player in research on things like treatment for anxiety, generally associated with life-threatening illnesses, and the use of MDMA or ecstasy in treatment of PTSD, treatment-resistant PTSD,
Yes,
specifically. So like if normal antidepressants or normal hormone replacement therapy and things like that don't work, then
with some pretty good success,
they've had a lot of really good success. This group is also active in efforts to legalize medical uses of psychedelics. There are varying different degrees of optimism. That's really gonna.
With the MDMA one, I definitely read that they were pushing forward on stage 2 trials with hopes to make it something in the next 5 years to get into the stage 3, and it seemed pretty optimistic on that note with those people that I was reading about, but I mean, I could definitely see some resistance to that.
Yeah, well, and there's one big problem with actually reclassifying psychedelics and things of that nature for medical use, or out of the Schedule 1, which is where most of them are located on the American and the British system right at the moment. Because implicit in Schedule 1 is that they have no medicinal value. So it's the same thing with like marijuana. But there's so like one of the things that people I think get a little frustrated about is even in like the marijuana issue is like, why can't we just legalize it? Why isn't anybody stepping up and really ending prohibition and all of that? So interestingly enough, 1971, there is the Convention on Psychotropic Substances, which is a treaty that exists between the United States and several European countries, and also between Mexico and Canada.
So is it basically an agreement?
It's a treaty. It's a treaty where basically all these countries agree to participate in the drug war.
That's kind of fascinating, because that removes any, I guess, easy way to go.
So basically, if you decide to federally legalize one of the substances that's on the Schedule 1, then you're actually in breach of the treaty, and nobody's really sure exactly what that's going to mean.
We have such an interwoven, mess of treaties going around.
It is.
I don't even.
It is.
I don't even know that there's one person that knows what the consequences and the interactions of all of them probably are.
Right, because I guess to play because part of me wants to be like, who gives a shit? It's time to recognize that a treaty is it's past its prime or whatever.
Definitely. You would think that there'd be a renewal period, I guess, on that, and I don't know whether there are, but
you'd think so, but I don't think there are.
Well, that's the war on drugs is to
right, and so one of the consequences is that there's a lot of red tape in doing research on anything that's listed as a Schedule 1 drug.
That is fascinating.
So that's why I think one of the sources that I found might have been the Johns Hopkins website that I was looking at, where they were talking about how difficult it is to actually. Dummy, I accidentally stopped it. So there's only four institutions in the country that have actually managed to cut through all the red tape to do research, which is why the research that we're going to cover today is really slow going, and a lot of it sort of springs out of old research that was done before it was
kind of shut down.
Before it was shut down, yeah, because it was legitimately, and most people don't know this, it was like things like LSD were being legitimately used as a companion to psychoanalysis.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, and there's another thing that a lot of people don't know, psychoanalysis not a particularly effective method of treatment on its own, but for some reason, if you give somebody an acid,
some drugs
if you give somebody some acid and have them sit down on the couch, all of a sudden it starts working a little bit better.
But I guess is that maybe there's some dialogue to be taken on. Do you think that is a valid method of treatment? If I guess there's tons of treatments that fail without a medical drug component in any way, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's not necessarily an unusual thing. That would be, you would need the acid to go forward with that.
Yeah. One of the things that it's attributed to, I think, largely is that, and this is my own sort of like, my own bullshit analogy, right?
That's all we need here. That's what we're after.
I'm condensing a lot of anecdotes and stories and research papers that I've gone through, and I've created this narrative here that is probably pretty far from true. But this is sort of one of the ways that I've kind of taken to sort of trying to understand it. So, like, you spend your whole life, let's say you're born with a deck of cards, right?
Yeah.
And the deck of cards is in completely random order.
Yeah.
And as you go through life and you try to learn more about this deck of cards or whatever, you sort of try to organize them. Okay, let's put all the red ones together. Let's put all the black ones together, right? So you keep on sort of rearranging the deck a little bit to make it more structured and to make more sense to you,
sure,
or whatever. And a lot of times if you make a mistake in the way that you've ordered something, it's kind of hard to get back in there and sort of to fix it, to fix the problem.
Retroactively go back, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when basically these people are getting these high doses of psychedelics and going into their therapy sessions, I think it seems to me a little bit like of a game of like 52 card pickup where the whole deck just kind of goes.
So basically you get to start from
scratch,
yeah,
basically.
Which it has some kind of compelling points to it. I mean, you've got a pretty ingrained system that is obviously not working as far as treatment's concerned with that particular patient. So starting from scratch may not be the worst idea, I guess.
Yeah.
I see some damages that could cause too, I guess.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it seems like you would be able to, but the research that I've done is just like almost overwhelmingly positive.
One of the things I read with
even when somebody
this,
has like a quote unquote bad trip or whatever,
sure,
in the end it generally turns out to be something beneficial.
I would say if there was any damages coming, I don't know that I would lay them so much on the pharmacological side. I think I would be more looking at the person trained to deal with it, and to walk them through something. I could see that leading to some possibly negative consequences. But one of the things I was reading about this particular topic was that even if we got all these wonderful, things passed that allowed this research to go forward, allowed this treatment to go forward, there aren't really any people that are trained on it at all. So we would really need to build up a whole new.
And that's another problem with with the fact that there's so much red tape that only a few institutions are able to do the research, is because you're really you're not cultivating a group of people who are experienced with these substances and how they should best be used. British psychiatrist James Rucker, this is from 2015 article in Time magazine, is talking about, this is a quote. It's now challenging for researchers to conduct research on the drugs, largely due to stigma, costs, and reluctance of funders to back such research. These restrictions and the accompanying bureaucracy mean that the cost of clinical research using psychedelics is generally 5 to 10 times that of research into less restricted but more harmful drugs such as heroin. So that's really interesting.
That is actually kind of fascinating, because I would not have, I would almost have categorized those as the same level of stigma involved. And I mean, this really does seem like a case where, in a lot of aspects, it's not even that the admittance is that the drug is bad or has no medical value. It's more just the past of saying the drug is bad and has no medical value, and the
it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in
it's
most
too hard
minds.
to overcome.
And in my own mind as well. I mean, we were talking about, when we opened the show, we were talking about the old, like, fucking wives' tales about, you know, you do 6 to acid in your life, and, you know, you're gonna go be permanently insane.
Sure.
That's and like, you know, we stigmatize. It is a laughable fallacy. We stigmatize things like psychedelics and like marijuana, and like crack cocaine is a really big one where we talk. You know,
and we were talking about earlier that,
you know,
there's
the fact
really no
that it
functional
is
difference
so much more
between.
There's no functional difference between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. It's just that crack cocaine is distributed small doses, so it's more available to poor and minority communities, and the fact that, you know, there's such a higher punishment for possession of crack cocaine than powder cocaine, you know, we see,
which
now,
already has a very serious punishment to be
right.
To be serious,
Absolutely, but we look at that punishment and we think of that as a reflection of how dangerous the substance is. Or whatever.
Yes.
And the punishments, by the way, for LSD, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but they're fucking insane.
Are they really?
They're pretty.
That's
bad.
Interesting. I always wondered in my wilder days whether that would be as big of a problem as any of the other drugs I was carting around.
So real quick, I'm going to try to hammer through a little bit of what, and just kind of touch base on a lot of different things, a lot of different substances and their uses, because there's each individual. It's not like you can say psychedelics are all good for this one thing or whatever.
Of course,
different types are being studied and show promise in different areas. So some of the most enthusiastic research by MAPS right at the moment is on MDMA and the treatment of treatment-resistant PTSD, and generally anxiety disorders. Especially those associated with terminal illness and autism, which I thought was really interesting. So adults...
Yeah, I heard about that, actually.
Adults with autism usually have a lot of residual anxiety, and they're using, with great promise, again, MDMA as a treatment for their anxiety-related symptoms.
That is kind of fascinating, because autism seems so much like a... how do you breach the wall there?
Yeah,
I guess
exactly.
kind of problem. Mm-hmm. And while I guess I don't know, I mean, granted, I didn't read too much on this. This was just something passing when we were talking that I looked into, was the use of that. And while I don't know that necessarily breaches that wall per se, but it does seem like it alleviates some of the symptoms of a person behind that wall, I guess. And you would think that a society would be almost honor bound to do something to help someone in that sort of situation. Honor bound, right? I don't know why I kid myself.
What the fuck does that mean? LSD. There was a pretty interesting study done recently. It was actually a meta-analysis that was published in the journal Nature in 2012, where it took a look at a lot of the old studies, a lot of the old research that was done into the effects of LSD on people with alcoholism.
What was
of the 530, and this is because the problem before was that we never had studies that focused on large enough numbers, right? To
Sure,
get reasonable
it's
data.
always been
So
very small.
what they did was they looked back and combined a whole bunch of studies, and of the 536 participants in the 6 trials, 59% of people receiving LSD reported lower levels of alcohol misuse, and that's compared to 38% of people who received placebo. What the fuck am I talking about?
I've heard of that drug.
And so they were surprised that the effect was so clear and consistent, and that the problem was there were too few participants. We already kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
But when you combine the data and the meta-analysis, we have more than 500 patients, and there is definitely an effect. In general, the reported benefits lasted at least 3 to 6 months, and their findings were published in the Journal of Psychopharmacology.
I gotta be honest, that one kind of blows my mind. I really would like to see more research on that, because
it's really interesting too when you consider conventional treatments that we have, like the 12-step programs and Alcoholics Anonymous.
With bafflingly small.
The most generous statistic I found was at best they're like the 12-step programs in Alcoholics Anonymous are roughly about a 12% success rate.
Yeah, and
but most scientists
think
that
that's
I've
a little inflated.
seen referenced in other places think that it's very likely more in the single digits.
That's especially, and granted, different. And when drugs have different levels on that. I know some of the research I did with, especially opiate addiction. I mean, it's the number is, if it's a number, it's shockingly small, 1 to less percent.
And another thing that's really kind of interesting is that we do have pharmaceutical treatments for alcoholism right at the moment. And what it usually involves is giving people dopamine blockers so that they're not sensitive to the urge for dopamine, dopamine rush, which is the cause of the chemical cause of alcoholism. And
is that the same? I mean, that's not the same thing as the ones that make you ridiculously sick, basically, from drinking alcohol.
No.
Which I hear is actually a really big treatment in Russia.
There are some medications like that, but I think the class of drugs, a lot of these drugs that dopamine blockers are things like muscle relaxers.
Okay.
I think also medications for neuropathic pain, like gabapentin, things like that.
Yeah.
And those are. There's a caveat, aside from the fact that those medications have side effects.
Yeah.
They only work for as long as you're on them. So if you want to quit drinking alcohol by taking these dopamine blockers, as soon as you stop taking them, you're not seeing the benefits anymore. And so the difference with that and some of the psychedelic research that's going on with LSD and with mushrooms is that that the people that are seeing benefits on a psychological level, or from benefits towards cessation of some sort of substance abuse problem, a lot of times it has a lot to do with the experiences that they have while they're basically tripping.
So it's more a...
I was trying to be more delicate than that. But
it's more of a personal realization, right, or something along those lines, that shows them.
So, and there's psilocybin, which is mushrooms, magic mushrooms, which I think is the dumbest. Every time I see that in a scientific article, it kind of it fucks with me. We can come up. So I call them psilocybus mushrooms.
that seems to work.
All right. Yeah. So psilocybin has actually been used by John Hopkins.
Please use the clinical term, Kevin.
Magic mushrooms. Magic mushrooms has been used by the Johns Hopkins
Perfect. That's exactly how I wanted this to go.
Medical Research Center for smoking. So
Oh God, I gotta do that shit.
So we've got some really interesting results. After 6 months, 80% are still tobacco free.
That's
after generally 1 to 2 treatments.
And just to like clarify with that, like mushrooms, well, you probably can get a. I don't know whether is there a poisonous dose on that with the proper.
Okay, I've got some information.
Okay, sorry, maybe
no, it's okay.
Jumping ahead a little bit.
No, it's all right. But well, I want to mention real quick before we get into that, psilocybin and LSD molecularly are very similar.
Okay,
so a lot of the things these are two that you're going to see in like you can there are studies into LSD and treating alcoholism, and there's studies with psilocybin treating alcoholism.
Okay.
And again, so 80% success rate after 6 months with 1 to 2 treatments, and then that's compared to 35% after 6 months with varenicline, which is another type of a pill that you take to help you quit smoking or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that those classes of drugs do sort of make you sick at the thought of tobacco.
Yeah. I've actually known a couple people who've tried that, and that was. I guess it worked.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But maybe
it
not for the right reason. I guess maybe it worked.
Well, it works for 35%.
There you go.
As compared to 80%.
It's interesting though, the methodology of treatment on this is you've got something that is an aversion therapy,
right,
versus something that is some sort of
like a
positive realization, insight therapy.
Yeah.
And you would think that those would be on just a like strictly logical level. Which one would you rather?
And by the way, just in case you think that I'm making this up, this is a quote from Matthew Johnson, who
I trust Matthew Johnson.
He was the head of the Johns Hopkins study, and he said quitting smoke isn't a simple biological reaction to psilocybin. As with other medications that directly affect nicotine receptors, like the ones that I was talking about just a minute ago. When administered after careful preparation and in therapeutic context, psilocybin can lead to deep reflection about one's life and spark motivation to change. So you're actually kind of finding your power to change within yourself. So I'm not making this up. And again,
definitely,
like said,
it sounds kind of like power language, but there's some real practical data.
I am again a totally unexperienced participant in this whole.
I gotta tell you guys, it's true. It's all true.
It's all true.
It's all true, man. It's all true.
LSD, psilocybin, ibogaine, which is really proving itself as sort of a really effective treatment for opiate addiction, which is a growing problem in the United States. Ayahuasca, there are people studying that for fucking everything.
And that's
the Peruvian cocktail.
Right, yeah, where you go and you...
It's basically an orally active form of DMT.
Interesting. Okay. I've of course heard of it. I don't know that I ever looked into what actually made it up, but that is really interesting that it is. So, I mean, theoretically, is there anything else in that, or is it just basically
No,
that?
it's just one particular type of dimethyltryptamine, which is a really interesting psychedelic that nobody's doing any research on,
which is surprising
because it's so fucking illegal. Yeah. So, like the treatment, the experiments with treatment with ibogaine, which is I only heard of just a few months ago.
My understanding is that's the one that
it's
for lack of a better term, lack of a scientific term, it kind of burns it out of you quickly. Is that correct? Is that the right one?
What do you mean?
Well, so whenever I was looking into treatments for opium addiction, there was a few that you've got your longer term treatments, being Suboxone, Subutex, which is a non-euphoric opium sort of opioid analgesic. Sorry, and then you've also got methadone as a big one, and then I always heard, if I understood correctly when I was reading about it, Ibogaine was the one where you would take it and it would almost, over the course of a very, very short amount of time, it would kind of purge your system of that. I heard that you had to be somewhat medicated to where you weren't conscious, because apparently it's just the worst experience. I'm wondering if I'm talking about a different drug.
You are talking about something different.
My apologies, guys.
That's okay.
Sorry, I really derailed that one.
So Ibogaine, I think the chemical component in it is a 5-MeO dimethyltryptamine. It's a different type of dimethyltryptamine.
Okay.
And so there are clinics in Mexico and New Zealand that are both using this, and it looks like MAPS is following those studies to see the long-term effects. But so far, it's really, really promising, and there's a lot of people that seem to be being helped by that. So ayahuasca we talked about. MAPS is also working with medical marijuana and PTSD. Again, on treatment-resistant forms. Interestingly, ketamine for depression.
Interesting. Yeah.
So instead of being on antidepressants at, on a regular rate,
this is something you could take, and then
you'd go into a clinic, and you can do this actually in the United States. You can do it in California. There was a comic, Neil Brennan, I think, who suffered from depression for a long time, and he's gone, and he goes and sits in the doctor's office, and they juice him up with some fucking ketamine, and he trips his balls off for about 6 hours, and you do I think you do a few sessions like that, and then the effects last for 6.
And that is kind of the interesting thing about these are not ongoing treatments that you necessarily go into or have every day, and I think that is a promising lead, really, to remove ourselves from some of this kind of
promising
pill-based culture, I guess. Where
it's promising, but the problem with that is it's sort of like the flu shot problem. Flu shots are always in short supply because nobody wants to make them, because you give it to somebody once. And
that is kind of a compelling. That's
nobody's making any money off of it, because
God forbid we did something that was good for the public and not make money off of it, right?
But it's interesting.
That is interesting, though.
The money motivation, which gets me.
It does. Me too.
If there is one industry that should not be for profit, if there are two industries that shouldn't be for profit: prisons
and pharmaceuticals.
Medicine.
Yeah. Medicine. Period. I completely, absolutely, 100% agree. It seems counterintuitive that those two would not be driven by whatever goals they're purportedly driven by, and instead driven by. But there is a lot of money there, and there's a lot of people that won't make. And
there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there, and I kind of put a pin in this and just sort of leave it as a fact in the back, or as a thought in the back of my mind or whatever. But that that no one's ever going to invest in treatments, and none of the pharmaceutical companies are interested in cures, right?
Of course,
basically,
of course,
we're not interested in cures. We're interested in treatments that
ongoing treatments. Yeah,
right. Which, I mean, the antidepressant industry is most certainly one of the biggest, sort of symbols of that. Okay. So you were talking about. The toxicity of psilocybin mushrooms. So the LD50 is the LD50, which is the lethal dose that you can, the dose that you can give your lab rats and expect that 50% of them will be dead. Okay, so that's the point where things start dying.
Stops being a good time.
So the LD50 on psilocybin itself, not mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, on psilocybin mushrooms is 280 milligrams, which is 641 times the dose necessary to achieve psychedelic effects.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
And so basically, you would have to just you wouldn't be able to eat that many mushrooms.
So if I recall my point that I was wondering about when you brought that up is you're looking at something that obviously is causing you health on a strictly like logical A/B level. This is smoking, for instance, what we were talking about. I think when we first brought this up was, you've got something that we know for a fact is causing you harm.
Right.
We've got something that you know for a fact will not cause you harm.
Right.
And serves as a cure for that thing. You would think that they would be pretty
cut and dry.
Yeah, draw the points right there.
Yeah,
but
that's maybe expecting a little bit more rationality out of society at large. By the way,
how did we get to a point where that was like a thing that is just beyond expectation? It's fascinating to me that
I like the term society at large because it sounds like it's like a fugitive.
It is a fugitive. it is running. Its wife is dead from a one-armed man. It is going.
That's exactly it. Society is like some crazy fucking.
Basically, it's Harrison Ford
off the chains. Yeah, exactly. So another interesting factoid: 280 milligrams. That is 1.5 times the lethal dose of caffeine.
That's interesting. Yeah. Huh.
And those are basically all my points that I really, really wanted to get out of the way and really talk about. But
well, I got a couple sort of add-ons. Not really. This is a little off on a different topic, I guess. But I'm going to pretend like they're add-ons so that this doesn't sound ridiculous.
That's okay.
So basically, I was doing a little research on. We've talked about the cost of drug use on a financial scale, the war on drugs, and we've also talked about prison sentences and stuff. And I did a little research on things that people are doing to kind of skirt the issue on that, and looking at some designer drugs,
right?
Which I'm pretty sure everyone is aware is. They're trying to achieve the same effects.
Are you talking about synthetic marijuana?
That is one of the ones I was looking at.
Shit?
Yeah, I didn't stick with bath salts because I thought that was pretty on everyone's radar, and I know that of course the synthetic weed thing is a very on everyone's radar right now as well. But that was one I didn't personally know a lot about, probably because I don't have much interest in marijuana. But
right.
I was also talking to my friend Nate, who is a drug and alcohol counselor, and we're going to try to put together an interview with him.
Yeah.
At some point.
Totally.
Maybe not the next episode, but it'd be kind of fun to just really have a dialogue with him about what his real world experiences are.
We might just call him up and set the phone on the
That's what I was thinking, basically, was what we're probably going to have to do. So I've got that in the works.
We are low fucking budget,
yes,
but we're bringing this podcast to you free of charge.
That's right.
We're not asking for shit.
Well, I mean, you can, but you won't.
There's no way. You could mail me a check, I guess.
Yeah, we've got that. I've got his address if you guys need it.
Right.
Anyway, so I was kind of interested in this, mostly because of a conversation that I had with him. We went through drug treatment together, and he has since become a drug and alcohol counselor.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I was really, really proud of him for doing that. I can't imagine.
There's a lot of people that choose to do that when they go through their own problems.
You've got two aspects at work there. I think you've got I've gone through this, I can understand this more than anyone else, and you've also got the other aspect, which is there's not a lot out there available for me as a convicted.
You have to be in order to beat this sort of the problem, you have to become sort of an expert in the process,
yes,
right?
yeah, and you need to, and you
I
know,
could be talking out of my ass. Please feel free to tell me.
I mean, no, it tracks. I think you become an expert in the process. You also find a way for employment of
Right.
the things that you're aware of. Like, you use your experience to gain a job, basically, which is a good thing.
Right.
And really, I mean,
You're making lemonade.
yeah, pretty much. So we had this conversation basically about what kind of problems he's experiencing now versus when we went through treatment and things like that, the kind of things that you were expecting. And he actually brought up synthetic marijuana as one of his like biggest, hardest issues to deal with.
Really?
There, and I was really surprised by that because I hadn't heard. I heard some like kind of scare stories about it.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly what I've seen.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of other people saying, well, that's just not true, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
This is a guy that I actually, respect a lot. And we've seen some shit. Like, we went through...
We did things.
We've been in them trenches. We've been wading through. We were in the shit and all that. And,
You were in the shit?
Yeah, we were in the shit.
Did you make a necklace out of ears?
I'm not going to say yes because the cases are still pending on that. But anyway, but, we've lost people to some pretty dramatic experiences. We've both seen people go through some really dramatic experiences. And he said that one of the worst things that he had ever seen was a person who had basically taken too much of synthetic marijuana and was just... I mean, it was almost like you would consider like a PCP drug kind of thing, where it was just you could not reason, you could not
Similar
interact.
to what you see when you see somebody on bath salts.
Yeah. Well, and what's crazy,
Except for maybe not trying to eat their own face. Or something.
yeah. I don't think there was as much eating faces. There was some violence though, and granted.
And I don't like. By the way, if anybody's
anecdotal.
ever used bath salts and you know that I'm full of shit, like all I know is what I've seen on TV, and I'm
That is
fully
for
aware that could totally be
sure
like
slanted.
the biggest scare fucking tactic in the world. So I don't take that seriously at all. Feel free to comment in the section below and let me know of your own personal experiences.
In fact, whether you agree or not, just disagree with him. Tell him that he's wrong. He needs to be from
I'm
this place once in a while.
begging people to disagree with me, and so far nobody's doing it.
So I assume
And
that means we're right.
I assume that means that nobody's listening.
No, that's crazy. But anyway, so onward with this.
Okay,
this,
sorry.
Story here. So basically, he was talking about, and it's almost like, those 50s scare like things for the 50s like scare movies for marijuana, like don't do a marijuana, reefer madness and stuff like that. It's I mean, and I want to be like clear. I certainly don't think that this is most of the time that you use synthetic weed. I'm sure a lot of people use it without problems, but there are some kind of valid points to it that I was kind of interested in, just wanting to find out. Well, why would this be happening? So I did a little research on it, and basically, the drug itself, it's a synthetic cannabinoid, and it is called JWH-018, and that is developed by John Huffman, I think it's Huffman. I might be wrong about that, but basically it was a test that it was something they were doing lab experiments with, strictly for animals.
Right.
It's certainly not meant for human consumption.
Trying to synthesize THC.
Yeah, and to some success, as I'm sure anyone who does use it will, express that it is a similar high. It's got a similar smell. It's got similar properties to it, but it does have some actually pretty serious consequences if things go wrong. And granted, that is if things go wrong. There's probably a lot of times when things will not go wrong. But one of the things to keep in mind with that kind of substance is that it is possible for that to be up to 100 times stronger than what you would normally be experienced, but it also doesn't last near as long either.
It fades really quick. I've heard that. I've heard a lot of people talking about it and how it's really it's not a very enjoyable experience.
That's kind of, and I was reading an article.
Generally leads to headaches and
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I was reading an article about this guy who I think he writes for Cracked, which is, why would I get my news from there? But
Nice.
but still,
reliable sources. That's the key to being no.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you should go. Like I go to HuffPo. I go to.
Yep.
Sometimes I'll click on the Salon article, even though I know that everything that Salon puts out is completely.
You gotta verify that shit for sure. But this was more a sort of own personal experience, and a lot of it backed up a lot of what I was reading elsewhere, where 9 times out of 10 you're gonna be fine, but when it does go wrong, it can actually go pretty wrong. There's been a few cases with basically seizures, paranoia, convulsions, hallucinations, high blood pressure, including some deaths that have been involved with it. Which, I mean, one of the things I was reading about was that this lady, one of the ladies who died from it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I want to.
Finish.
Okay, one of the ladies who had died from this thing, one of the things that people had been saying was that, she had just gotten a bad batch. To me, the fact that you can get a bad batch of pot is fucking
not
baffling.
a problem that is precedented.
Exactly, and so to me,
thanks,
that's
prohibition.
Yeah, right. Well, and that is really the key of this, is that this is a process that is used to stay one step ahead of the legalization or the illegalization process, to where you can continue to release these things. But the problem is that
you're dealing with like basement chemists.
Yes.
Buying shit from China. They have no idea what's in it.
And even the ones you buy, you can buy the shit at gas stations, for instance.
Right.
Even the ones you buy there, anyone can make that. It's potpourri is what it's marketed under. And
incense.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a situation where you've got anyone can make that and sell it. There's really no quality controls on that.
None.
Because the DEA and legislation have been trying.
The source chemicals that you're using, the solvents that you're using, you're picking those up from a hardware store, and they're usually used to strip paint.
Certainly, there's certainly a lot of that. The other thing is that even when you do get a good batch,
each one of those things, like in addition to being of questionable purity or whatever, it's depositing something in there, like an industrial byproduct.
Sure,
You're not smoking THC. You're smoking THC with like
gasoline and
heavy. No,
credit. I don't know that there's actually gasoline, but the point is that they've been
industrial byproducts.
Yes, that's a good word for it. So they've been trying to keep ahead of the legal status of it, because they keep shutting down certain chemical combinations, and so they'll switch to a new chemical that is virtually identical, but it's not identical. I mean, there are certain byproducts that even the closest related chemicals can have that are not expected, especially when you mix them together. And so I guess what that really comes down to is it's a sort of a desperate act to stay ahead of basically laws that are preventing it, and it seems so much more dangerous to be operating under that principle. Like, why is that a more valid, like, we're okay with that, and we're trying to shut it down, obviously, but just the knowledge that that's happening for the reason that something is illegal, and I think at the very least it should be decriminalized. It's kind of baffling to me.
I think it should be like one of the things that you really see a focus on with a lot of the information that I've encountered is like the importance of like a clinical or not a clinical setting, but like a controlled setting.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So your mood and your intention going into the experience is directly related to the results that you get. So we're not talking about like using this in a party drug fashion. And I think a lot of the interest coming from people, especially people like me, people who do suffer from alcoholism and nicotine addiction and things like that, things that we would like to have access to these medications and these treatments for, like, we're interested in it for that sort of like helpful and potentially sort of revelatory. I won't deny, as an artist,
I wouldn't mind a little bit of
I could, I feel like my deck has gotten a little bit too ordered.
You need to mix it up a little bit.
And sometimes I need to kind
that.
of spray the cards around the room and sort of
really, I mean, I
get a new
would
perspective on
probably
things.
say everyone would be a benefit
I think
for
a
that.
lot of people could benefit from that. And so Chris Ryan has an interview on his website, tangentially speaking, in case you're interested, with a couple that runs an ibogaine clinic in Mexico, and so they're using it largely for treatment of opiate addictions, but they're also licensed to administer it in sort of a I hate to use the S word, but spiritual, sort of ritualistic sort of sense, so that people that are just interested in some of the and I think that's something that we don't talk about enough, is mental or psychological treatment for the people that we consider generally healthy.
Yeah, so maybe it's not something.
I'm not going to get locked up anytime soon for being crazy. I'm a pretty fucking neurotic guy.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm functioning in real life, but I could a lot of times I could really use some.
Yeah, well, so you're dealing with do we wait till the person is non-functioning before we even consider treatment?
At this point,
I would think that we absolutely do. I would think that most doctors would probably agree that maintenance is probably better than preventative maintenance. Yeah. It seems pretty obvious and it's also something we talk about in psychology. Really, psychology is more of a crisis-driven thing.
How do you heal the sick versus how do you
maintain
how do you help the well to become more well
to stay well. It's really a kind of a pretty compelling point on that. So I think that's deep shit.
Hey, you know what?
I do have a couple more if you want to throw some more out. So just to give you some numbers on the synthetic weed thing, sorry about that, guys. The Poison Control Center had gotten in 2011. The Poison Control Center got 6,955 calls based on synthetic marijuana poisoning. Basically, people who were probably going to be okay, but what were panicking based on the feeling that had given them, which is a vast uptick from the other one. The year before it was half as much, and the year before it was 15 calls or something along those lines. So it's definitely a rising trend that is. I mean, I don't want to say people shouldn't go and use that. I just think that if you are going to, you need to be aware of some of the consequences of that, because we look at pot as pretty harmless. I mean, I think most people do who aren't reefer madness people. We believe it to be relatively okay.
I don't think those people really exist anymore. Well, no,
they do. They certainly do. I've met a few of them.
I take it back.
We give humanity a bit too much credit sometimes, but I think that's definitely. It's clear to just be sure that this is not marijuana. This is not the same thing. Might simulate the same thing, but it is not the same thing. I got a report of a 13-year-old boy from Pennsylvania who got chemical burns on his lungs, got a double lung transplant, and then died shortly afterwards. There was also a few Texas kids. They suffered heart attacks from it and stroke. I think there was a stroke.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, if you're seeing results like that, you know for sure that it's more dangerous than something like marijuana that's never killed anybody ever. And
I mean, we live in a really interesting time. You could probably attribute some stupid little accident to someone being high, I'm sure. But no direct.
I think there was one report in Colorado after they legalized that they tried to get that Fox News tried to get a panic started on.
Yeah.
It fucking fell flat.
Yep.
They were some guy ate a pot gummy or something and walked off a roof or something like that. It was motherfucker shouldn't have been on the roof.
Right. Oh man.
How was that guy walking? He ate a whole gummy. yummy.
That is an interesting thing that you bring up.
That's
kind of
crazy.
Come bring me to my next little topic. It's a very small topic, but
by the way, real quick, marijuana, you can't die from it.
Yep.
Period.
Yeah.
Because it's unlike other drugs, which usually work on your central nervous system, and they kind of they change your autonomic nervous system. So if you overdose on heroin, you can, effectively stop your own heart.
Yes.
Chemically. If you overdose on cocaine or methamphetamines, you can give yourself a heart attack, right? So marijuana, you might wish you were dead.
Sure. I've been there. That is my general feeling with pot whenever I've tried it.
You might wish you were dead, but you're not going to die.
No. My few times definitely attribute to that. So your point on the sort of media scare, I did a little research on something that I actually thought was kind of interesting with another designer drug that's come out. It's called Crocodile, and
I've heard that name before. Refresh my memory.
It's not a good thing. It's desomorphine, which is basically a synthetic opiate. Yeah. And this is your basic just. Everything that you could imagine bad with like meth production, you can imagine it with this, but for opium. And to be fair, that sounds pretty bad, but this is the one
that can blow up your trailer home.
No, but I don't know about that. I would assume so because I do think gasoline is a pretty big component. But once again, there's a diversity of what you can put in it, I'm sure, to get the desired effect. But basically, I mean, this is the drug that has just been ravaging Russia and other European communities. There was this kind of conspiracy theory that it came out of Afghanistan as a basically revenge thing. And
that's interesting because Afghanistan is the largest opium producer.
Yes. Well, and see, that is the one where Afghanistan maybe was narco-terrorizing the Russians with opium.
Right.
You kind of
probably not synthetic opium.
Yeah. So this kind of like theory, and who knows? Maybe you just want to kick it up, right?
It could be.
But the thing is, it did originate in the United States. This was a drug that was originated here, I believe, in a clinical setting, not in any sort of been released to the public or in any sort of way that.
Well, we don't need to. We've got fucking Oxy.
Well, and see, that's the thing. So this kind of brings me to my point. Let me just talk about what Crocodile is real quick. So Crocodile basically they call it that because it can turn your skin into crocodile skin. Is the way it looks. It kind of like gets all flaky and gray. Yeah. This is also the one, and I mean, I almost wish I didn't research this shit because it was so fucking disturbing. But like, watching someone who has rotted from the inside with their arm, a bone hanging out, and just meat missing from this drug. I mean, it is not a. This is you're going out.
Where'd you find
with this
these
drug.
pictures?
I think I was. One of them was Vice. Another one was just.
Was
like,
it?
Yeah, it was like. I mean, man, these were.
I kind of trust Vice.
No,
I was gonna say if you found it in like some sort of.
No, this is pretty
Russian
well known.
Publication.
This is a pretty well known epidemic actually, with especially in Europe and Russia, mostly Russia at the moment, I believe. But anyway, this is
the lesson
probably
here, kids, is that when it comes to drugs,
stay to the regular fucking drugs, guys.
Organic.
Come on,
buy organic.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, or oxys. I mean, it's kind of organic, right? To some extent. But anyway, the interesting thing that made me think of that was you were talking about news scares, and we had this really big one a little while ago about how Crocodile had made it to the United States, and there's this big stir of media, basically propaganda about how this had come here and it was just wrecking our youths and all this sort of thing. There's not actually been a confirmed case, at least up till now, that I'm aware of. I did some pretty good research on it, and it looks like while there were symptoms that could be attributed to that, it could also be attributed to any number of combinations of drugs and unhealthy practices with needles and things like that. Certainly Crocodile is absolutely one of the worst ones. I mean, the thing with Crocodile is if you're doing Crocodile, you're you're going out. I mean, there's no done. You're not coming back from that one probably. It's not something that happens, overnight or anything, but it is something where these people have continued to use to the point where, I mean, they are literally rotting from the inside out.
These guys need some ibogaine.
I was reading too about some treatments that are available in Russia, and there is not a lot of that, and they really need to be taking a look at that. I think there's a sort of I think there's maybe, man. Well, you're absolutely right, and I think there's maybe like one of like the few groups in Russia that does it. I think they're called like Revolution or Resuscitate Russia. I can't remember what the fuck they're called, but something along those lines.
It's something in Cyrillic.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's the American name of it that I was saying, but they're one of the few religious-based ones, and that can be a big problem. I know with me and with a number of other people that I went through, my own issues with.
They're all faith-based.
Yeah, primarily they are all
like
faith-based.
Any 12-step program, like every other step of the program says something about God, and so apparently, if you're an atheist, you're fucked.
Yeah, and I going into it even with a like more agnostic view, like I can't even understand, like, I tried to bring up, and this was one of the big things that got me about treatment, and we'll probably wrap up after this, but was that I tried to do some research on some non-religious based treatments,
right,
and present it to the group, because I knew that there were other people like me that were having issues with this concept.
People get pissed when you start trying to fuck with their God.
Got unbelievably angry with me and mocked me. I mean, it was not embarrassing on where I felt like I shouldn't have brought that up, but it was embarrassing just as a whole that was the reaction to an alternative method of treatment. Because let's face it, 12 steps programs, AA, NA, all that stuff, they are a great resource for the ones that it helps. I do not deny that. But there's a lot of people that doesn't help. We need to expand our treatment.
90-some%.
Precisely. And don't get me wrong, like, I've met some people who've made it work, and that is beautiful, and I give them all credit for that.
Right.
But I also know that there's so many people that fall through the cracks there. If that's not working on more people, then we need to be looking at other options.
It's like when I look at those statistics and I see that that it's like less than 10% in most cases of a success rate. It seems to me that that success rate is not attributable to
you would wonder whether that's
not
actually
the confounding factor in this sort of experiment. It's I mean, like, it seems to me that if it's that low, that's kind of within your error bars, and these people are probably like they're good because they were able to maybe latch onto something, but maybe not necessarily that. Yeah,
but they were able to
get
away
succeeding
from
despite or in conjunction with.
Instead of because
you lose any sort of sense of causation there, and it's just
and yet that is the presentation they give you. It really is. That is your way out, and it is the only way out. And I mean, is that enough?
And it's really interesting really too, isn't. Because I mean, like, okay, so we fuck the whole LSD conversation for the time. So we were talking about the dopamine blockers earlier. There's a really, really good recent Radiolab podcast where they're talking about the dopamine blockers and things of that nature for alcohol cessation and things like that, and the backlash that those treatments get from people in the 12-step program are like, you can't use a pill to overcome that or whatever.
And that is exactly,
And I mean, not to say that they're entirely wrong, because I think that if you are getting onto a pill to quit doing something, and like as soon as you stop taking the pill, like you're back to where you started.
Are you really progressing as a person?
And that's one of the things that I think is really exciting about psychedelic research, is that it is actually like it's giving people a tool that they can use to take control and to change themselves, right?
You know, just to throw on with that, there was actually a interesting technological experiment that I've been seeing lately come up, and it has to do with you go in basically for I think it's a few sessions a month or something along like those lines, maybe once every month or something like that. But basically, it's a I wish I could even remember what the fuck it was called, but it's some sort of brainwave alterer.
Well, what's it do? Oh, so like a
it's a technological equivalent of what you would consider
like a magnetic what is it? There's TDCS, which is like transcranial direct current stimulation, which is like electricity in your brain, and then there's
I think it is the magnetic
transcranial magnetic, and they can use that to sort of like fuck with your brain too.
I believe it is the magnetic one that I was reading about, and while the data size is a little small for my taste, some of the experiments that
a lot of success with a lot of those.
Exactly, and so I think I want to see more on that, but that's another alternative treatment, another tool to be used in this handbag of things that we need to deal with these sorts of problems, and one that shows a lot of promise, not only on that level, but on a level of possibly having people have those. I believe I was looking at, they were trying to, talk about having a personal thing that you could just carry around with you and use it when it's required. It seems like it's somewhat of a mood adjuster, I guess I would say. It doesn't seem like I take something that's like a pill mood adjuster, but it does seem like it creates a sense of relative well-being for a while afterwards. It calms the mind pieces. But the one really glowing recommendation of that was this woman who had been through so many treatments you couldn't count, been through all the ones that you could possibly think of, barring maybe some of the ones we've been talking about, and had lost pretty much everything. But this was actually something that actually seemed like it worked for her. She was able to maintain 6 months of sobriety from this, where before she was able to maintain a few days or a week or something along those lines. So I mean, it's got to be a case-by-case basis, but it is something where the problem is big enough and the tools we have are not solving that problem, so we need to get more tools.
Yeah, the tools we have aren't even approaching it, I think.
No, not even in the least.
And, we've got to get over, I don't know, like, I think part of it is probably like, I guess people feel like if it's a pill that's helping them achieve this thing, then it's not a matter of their own free will, and I think a lot of people feel freaked out by that. I
get that. I also would like to put forward that that's not an unusual thing in this culture anyway. I mean, that's in antidepressants, antipsychotics. I mean, if it is a problem, and granted, I don't know that I would 100% classify it as a. I think we actually talked about this in the first episode, but I think that there is a level of behavioral aspects to it rather than just a disease
by the
aspect.
Way, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to sort of add as a caveat before we leave that that all of these administrations of all these psychedelic drugs are done in conjunction with intensive psychotherapy and
that is important.
Intensive, especially like cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that. So,
and I think that was briefly touched on, and that is like the
I just
most
wanted
important.
to make sure that I emphasized it. Because
that is the most important aspect of it. This isn't giving people drugs like to just fuck off and have a good time.
Right.
This is giving people drugs to really deal with some issues and get through some barriers that they've felt before.
In a helpful setting where you're in the company of people who know what's going on, who know what you should expect, where you feel safe. Because if you don't feel safe, then that's going to affect your. We talked about how your mindset going into the session is really important.
Yes.
So if you don't feel safe, obviously that's not going to be a mindset that's conducive to really helping yourself heal or helping yourself deal with the issue that you're trying to.
Yeah, definitely.
Are we done?
I think we're done. So thank you guys for joining us for Drugs Part 2, the relapse.
The relapse. The flashback.
Yep, we're going to try to get that interview up at some point.
Flashbacks and how sort of ridiculous that is.
Oh, man, we probably should.
No, that's all right. No, we've gone for so long at this point.
Yeah.
I think I'm
a little drugged out. It's kind of odd. I think I'm ready to move on to a new topic maybe next week, and then we'll do that interview though, because that is something I really want to get done. I want to get a professional's experience with these sorts of problems, because it is something I want to hear another person's voice.
Yeah, I definitely think we should revisit the topic in the future. Maybe not next week.
Yep, but that's my thought. All right, guys. Well, thanks, Chris. This is Kevin. We didn't introduce, but
we didn't. But if you don't know us by now, what the fuck?
You probably haven't watched it anyway. No. So what the fuck?
So anyway, stay frosty, people. You can get a hold of us on Twitter, as I keep begging people to do, but nobody ever really takes me up on it. We are at Clickbait Pod.
We'll edit this sad.
You can also. I'm not gonna edit nothing. You can also get a hold of us on Facebook. Don't leave comments on YouTube, because I don't read YouTube comments. But you can give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you want to. But check us out on Facebook. We are the Clickbait Podcast. And thanks for joining us. See you later.
Laters.